There is a place on Earth where the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea collide in a war of endless storms. The Aleutian Islands. A 1,200-mile chain of volcanic spears piercing the fog. This is the birthplace of winds, a land of williwaws, sudden hurricane-force gales that fall from the mountains and can shatter a boat in seconds. It is a world of horizontal, freezing rain and a wind that never, ever stops. A modern human stranded here would face a lethal, creeping cold. But their greatest challenge would not be the storm. It would be a simple, impossible question. How do you build a shelter in a land with no trees? There is no timber, no logs, no wood. Yet 9,000 years ago, a civilization of maritime masters, the Unangax, thrived here. They didn't just survive the wind, they erased it. They didn't build on the land, they built into it. And for a roof, they looked to the sea. They built their homes from the bones of giants. How did a Stone Age people, with no trees and no metal, engineer a storm-proof fortress that could withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds? And how did they build an entire architecture from the jaws and ribs of the largest creatures on Earth?
The Aleutian chain is one of the most violent, unstable, and unforgiving environments on the planet. It is a line of fire, a volcanic arc of 130 volcanoes separating two of the world's most turbulent seas. The weather here is not just bad, it is a constant physical assault. The gales are legendary. Williwaws, born in the mountains, accelerate down the slopes, hitting the coastline at over 120 miles per hour with no warning. But the true enemy isn't the wind's power, it's the cold. This isn't the dry, crystalline cold of the high Arctic. It is a wet, heavy, penetrating dampness. A liquid cold that clings to skin and clothing, draining body heat with terrifying speed. Hypothermia is not a risk here, it is a constant. And then, the ultimate engineering problem. There is nothing to build with. The islands are treeless. Not a single native conifer or hardwood grows on this entire 1,200-mile chain. The constant wind and volcanic soil prevent it. The only wood that ever arrives is driftwood, small, gnarled, and precious, tossed ashore by the storms. It is enough for a tool or a kayak paddle, but not for a house. You cannot build a log cabin. You cannot frame a roof. So, what do? How do you build a home when the land gives you nothing but rock, grass, and a wind that wants you dead? The answer lies with the Unangax people, or Aleuts, who inhabited these islands for 9 millennia. They were, perhaps, the greatest maritime hunters the world has ever known, masters of the kayak, or ikyaks. They understood this brutal ocean, and they took their inspiration from the only creature that truly mastered it, the whale. Their solution was the Barabara, and its genius starts with a simple rule, the same one discovered by the builders of Skara Brae 5,000 miles away. If you can't block the wind, get under it. The Unangax didn't build on the land, they built into it. The first step was excavation. A family group would excavate a large rectangular pit several feet deep into the soft volcanic earth of a hillside, always facing the sea. This immediately solved 2 problems. First, the walls of the pit were now the house, protected from any and all wind. Second, the earth itself became their insulation. The ground maintains a stable, constant temperature, far warmer than the freezing air above. They were building a geothermal home. But the most ingenious part was the entrance. They didn't just dig a hole. They built a long, low subterranean tunnel, sometimes 20 feet long, that sloped down into the house. This was a cold trap. Any wind that managed to find the tiny, low opening would be heavier than the warm air inside the house and would fall into the trap and stop, unable to climb up into the main living space. The 100-mile-per-hour gale was defeated before it ever got in. But this still left the great Aleutian riddle. How do you roof it? With no trees for timber, what do you use for rafters? The Unangax found their timber in the ocean. They built their architecture from the monsters of the deep. When a whale, a fin, a humpback, or a right whale washed ashore, it was a gift from the sea, a divine event. A single whale provided tons of food, oil for lamps, and most importantly, bone. This was the lumber of the Aleutians. They would harvest the massive 20-foot-long jaw bones. They would collect the 10-foot curving ribs. These were their rafters. These were their beams. The construction was a masterpiece of resourcefulness. The massive, heavy jawbones of the whale were raised vertically inside the pit, acting as the main posts and beams, strong enough to hold up the world. The long, curved ribs were laid across them, creating a domed, interlocking framework, a skeleton of bone, a whale's rib cage inverted to become a human home. In a land with no wood, they found a material that was stronger, more durable, and most sacred. Once the bone frame was lashed together with sea lion sinew, the final stage began. They covered the entire bone skeleton with layers of woven grass mats, and then they covered that with the final brilliant layer, thick, heavy blocks of sod cut directly from the tundra. This sod was the key. It was waterproof, shedding the endless driving rain. It was the ultimate insulator. A foot of sod has an R-value far greater than a modern wall. And most importantly, the native grasses in the sod never died. The grass on the roof would re-root, and the entire house would become, once again, part of the living landscape. The wind couldn't peel this roof off because the roof was alive, its roots anchoring it to the earth.
The finished Barabara was a marvel of camouflage and efficiency. From a distance, it was invisible. It looked like just another small grassy hill on the tundra. An unsuspecting visitor might walk right over it, but for the Unangax family, it was a sanctuary. Imagine it, 100-mile-per-hour williwaws screaming outside, a horizontal chaos of ice and sea spray. You crawl into the low, dark, silent tunnel. You push aside the sealskin flap, and you enter. You descend the ladder into a single large subterranean room. The wind is gone. It is utterly silent. The only sound is the crackle of a single stone lamp burning whale or seal oil. The air is warm, a stable 50 degrees even in the depths of winter. It is smoky, and it smells of oil and sea and family. In the center, a communal hearth for cooking. Along the sides, raised sleeping platforms covered in warm furs and sea otter pelts. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a womb, a warm, safe, silent space in the middle of the world's greatest storm. Often these Barabaras were huge, housing multiple families, 20 or 30 people in one structure, sharing the warmth, the food, and the stories. For 9,000 years, this architecture worked. It was a perfect, sustainable solution, using every single resource the barren land provided. They used the earth for warmth, they used the grass for a roof, and they used the bones of the whale as their timber. These houses were the safe base, the home from which the Unangax hunters would launch their kayaks into the lethal sea, bringing back the resources that kept the cycle of life going. So, what happened to them? Why are they now just depressions in the earth, house pits studied by archaeologists? The Barabaras did not fail. The culture that built them was shattered. In the 1740s, Russian fur traders arrived in the Aleutians. It was an invasion. The Unangax people were decimated by violence, slavery, and diseases for which they had no immunity. Their populations collapsed. They were forcibly relocated, their traditional way of life destroyed. The Barabaras were abandoned. The sod roofs, no longer maintained, eventually collapsed. The whalebone frames fell in, and the earth slowly, over 200 years, reclaimed the structures. Today, archaeologists excavate these house pits, and what they find is a skeleton. The earth is peeled back, revealing the collapsed giant 9,000-year-old bones of the whales that once held up their world.
It is a profound, haunting image. Skara Brae is a marvel because its builders used stone. The Barabara is a marvel because its builders had no stone. They had no trees. They looked at the most hostile environment on Earth and used the very essence of that environment, the earth, the grass, and the giants of the sea, to build a home. It is a blueprint for survival, a testament to a people who did not fight the wind. They simply let it blow over them, safe in their homes of bone.